Hello everyone, welcome to my today video. In this video we will find out how could China just broke the US dollar. You know that China and Brazil have officially agreed to stop using the US dollar. Before everyone panics, however, know that this is only a dramatic ruse to make a point. Today let's discuss exactly what's happening, why this is happening, what this realistically means for everyone watching, and whether or not this is a topic to be concerned about, because I have to say, this is something to be taken extremely seriously. After all, the billionaire class, the world's second largest economy, is gradually cutting off ties with the United States. And this is not surprisingly the first to go. Before we begin, I must warn you that the like button is also in danger of not being smashed for the YouTube algorithm, so if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button or subscribing, it does help. Ray Dalio has previously described the impending collapse of every major economy as we know it, how these cycles typically happen on a regular basis, and how we could best prepare for what is to come based off predictable events that happen about once every 100 years. Because it is secure resiliency and stability, like when the system was first adopted. It was used as a way to keep the price of investments, exchange rates, and commodities like gold and oil stable, knowing that no matter which currency you held, its value was pegged to that of the US dollar. See, when you have dozens of countries all trading goods and services with each other, it helps to have one universal currency accepted around the world, with a predictable value to conduct those transactions in. Otherwise, you run the risk of getting paid in a currency that might be difficult to exchange, or maybe its value has fallen by the time you're able to convert it back to your native currency. So think of this kind of like a global transfer of value through the US dollar that everyone has agreed to be safe. Of course, the United States benefits from this as well, because more countries use the US dollar. More countries hold on to those dollars, and as a result we have greater buying power. But the US dollar is apparently at risk of losing that reserve currency status. And to look no further than Ray Dalio's shifting world order to comprehend why. For example, before 1945, the reserve currency was held by the British pound, which lasted for 105 years after the French Revolution, followed by the Netherlands. As he explains, throughout history, there is a constantly changing world order between the leading economy and the rising economy, and over time one will fail to make way for something new, followed by Venetian gold, Spain, Portugal, and so forth, with the knowing that reserve currencies have never lasted forever and that they change approximately every 100 years. In a transition that lasts between 10 and 20 years, you might be wondering what causes this. This could be summed up into three categories. Every time a new reserve currency is introduced, there is a period of growth before the peak and the decline. People who bet and borrow on that system continue to live in peace and prosperity, which is typically characterized by a strong work ethic, character development, and critical thinking skills in the classroom. Resources for a sustained increase in productivity. But in order to finance that sustained increase in productivity, there must be a system in place for borrowing and allowing people from around the world to convert their money into investments that share in the success of making that happen. The general consensus is that as people earn more, their time becomes more valuable in comparison to other nations, who would be willing to do the same work for less. On top of that, other nations have the ability to take the blueprints of the most recent innovation and then copy that for a fraction of the cost, reducing the leading powers' comp. That all the successful reserve currencies followed the exact same path, leading to, of course, the top at the peak. The tipping point, however, occurs when individuals lose confidence in the reserve currency. They choose to sell rather than reinvest their profits, which of course causes the decline. The central bank has already stepped in 3 times to finance an industry collapse since the 1990s. Once in the CM bubble, once during the mortgage crisis, and again during the COVID shutdown. Historically, if a country cannot sustain its own debts during an economic downturn, it must choose between defaulting and printing more money, which devalues the currency and raises inflation. He explains that these events have repeatedly occurred since the Roman Empire, despite the fact that no two changes are identical, and that other countries eventually replaced the United States as the reserve currency. Been exactly the same, although technically a dollar is always equal to a dollar. There are 3 different metrics that are used to track the value of the dollar. And we can use those metrics to predict what will happen in the future. In this case, the value of our currency is indeed declining. The first factor is the currency exchange rate. When it comes to the exchange rate to other currencies, it is true that the value of the US dollar has been gradually declining since 2020. The second factor is the demand for 10-year treasury notes. And the third is what are known as foreign currency reserves, which is just a fancy way of saying how many US dollars are held by other countries. As for the demand for 10-year treasury notes, these are essentially just a 10-year loan to the government. And for people who want a safe place to store their money, they'll essentially buy these and then get a guaranteed return on their capital in terms of our own currency. Though the value of the US dollar has been actually going up alongside with the recent drop. However, the US dollar is more recently higher than it's been throughout the last 20 years despite the recent drop. Second, what's taking place right now? China and Brazil announced a deal on March 29 to trade in their own currencies instead of using the US dollar as a middleman. This would allow them to trade with each other without having to buy US dollars in the process. They currently transact about $150 billion annually, which is no longer going through the US. Now, bear in mind that a situation similar to this has occurred previously. Since 2010, China has been gradually moving away from the US dollar. A year ago, both Russia and India stopped using the US dollar. And Saudi Arabia recently declared that it was willing to consider trading the Chinese yuan as well as China and Russia. Brazil, South Africa and India have already teamed up to conduct transactions in their own reserve currency that is distinct from. This isn't exactly a new development, as our dollars are often referred to as BRICS. But as great capital notes on Twitter, it could have a big impact. As a result of the sanctions and the Russia-Ukraine war, trading volume exploded. As of now, even though the US dollar's future looks uncertain, there is currently nothing close to being able to take its place. Of course, hearing that China's economy is predicted to outpace the US by 2030 or beyond is not exactly the most encouraging news. But is this actually something to worry about, and could the US be heading towards a time where it is no longer the reserve currency? Well, as of now, even though the future of the US dollar looks uncertain, there is currently nothing close to being able to take if there were to be a new reserve currency. A lot of things would have to take place first, despite a significant black swan event that threatens the United States' involvement in international trade. Of course, this doesn't mean that there isn't any concern at all, with even Elon Musk tweeting that this is a serious issue. It also doesn't mean that it might not happen, or it might not be able to take place in a way that we could reasonably predict. With excessive government spending and US policy that makes other nations want to abandon the dollar, it is understandable why Barron's recently reported that the US stimulus program, following the financial crisis, began a currency war by devaluing the dollar in an effort to strengthen America's economy. Saudi Arabia signed a new trade agreement, which will ultimately put a lot more pressure on the United States. But at the end of the day, there is still a very real risk that other nations will want to compete. However, I personally think that the US dollar as a reserve currency is not going anywhere. It is still in the top spot by a wide margin. And most of the headlines that you see are just looking for clicks. In reality, the US dollar is being traded less, and there is more competition between countries. And that's not going away anytime soon. I believe that worrying about this will be extremely counterproductive, especially since there are far more urgent issues that need to be addressed, such as raising the debt ceiling, which will probably have a significant negative impact on the markets if both sides can't reach an agreement. For this reason, I tend to think that it's always a good idea to understand what's happening and why this is happening, but instead focus your time on focusing on things such as whether or not you're diversified, whether or not you save enough money, whether or not you have a steady income, and whether or not you invest regularly will, in my opinion, help you become much wealthier than considering the possibility that the US may cease to be the world's reserve currency at some point, perhaps even within our lifetime. Additionally, by concentrating on what you can control, you will become much wealthier. As a result, if you haven't already done so, you'll be in a much better position to subscribe. I hope you enjoyed the video, and, if you do, it will help out greatly. With that in mind, I'd like to thank you all for watching. As always, feel free to add me on Instagram, Thank you so much, and until next time. Bye bye and have nice days.